Welcome to the first episode of Last Week's Madness, where I go over last week's insanity, stupidity, and blatant hypocrisy. To start this episode off, we're going to look at Trump's insane response to last week's mass shootings.
President Trump addressed the steps he believes the U.S. should take after two deadly mass shootings in El Paso and Dayton this weekend. Mr. Trump zeroed in on a number of areas he wants the government to tackle, such as mental health and violent video games. The president also mentioned one step he'd like to take on the topic of gun control.
We must make sure that those judged to pose a grave risk to public safety do not have access to firearms, and that if they do, those firearms can be taken through rapid due process. That is why I have called for red flag laws.
Mental health, violent video games, and those judged to pose a grave risk to public safety. I'm curious, how will they determine that one is a grave risk to public safety? Will people who play violent video games be judged as being a grave risk to public safety? Or how about people who are against pumping vaccines into their kids? I mean, technically, because the government claims that its purpose is to secure domestic tranquility or to protect the public, anybody who speaks out against any government program could be deemed as somebody who is a grave risk to public safety. And I'm actually going to take a moment to address people who may say that these red flag laws are unconstitutional. To you who say that this is unconstitutional, it actually isn't unconstitutional, and you do not understand the Constitution. To understand the Constitution, to truly understand the Constitution, you need to understand its preamble, where it says, "We the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America." So basically, they can take away any number of your rights to ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, and promote the general welfare. And this is exactly what they have done in the past with things like the Patriot Act. And this is actually an argument that was made by the Anti-Federalists, a group of our founding fathers who were against the ratifying of the Constitution. But I'm not going to go any further into it. However, I do recommend that everyone read the Anti-Federalist Papers if you want to truly understand the nature of this government. And I will also say that just because it's not unconstitutional does not mean that it's not tyrannical. These red flag laws, as well as many other laws created by this Constitution, are most definitely tyrannical. Now going back to the insane response of last week's mass shootings. Both mass shootings combined left a total of 31 people dead and a couple of dozen injured. But that is practically nothing when you compare it to the gun violence in Chicago.
Chicago! You're out of there! Go on, you're gone. Go on.
According to this article published August 8th, 2019 in the Chicago Tribune, 1,636 people have been shot this year, the year 2019, and that is 178 fewer than 2018. And we have to keep in mind that Chicago has some pretty strict gun control laws. But I guess making a big fuss out of these shootings wouldn't make much sense, because you can't say we need more gun control laws, because there's already enough in Chicago. And clearly, the people who are doing the shootings are not following those laws. They are criminals, getting their hands on guns regardless of the gun control laws. And according to another article published in the Chicago Tribune, a day after that article, on Saturday, August 10th of 2019, there have already been 309 people killed in Chicago this year. But don't worry, that's 55 fewer than 2018. And if you look into this article, it shows precisely how many people are killed every year. It averages between 400 and 800 people. 800 was the top, about 400 was the lowest. And this article actually breaks down the cause of these deaths. And for the previous 365 days, 297 of these deaths were gun-related. Now, I don't know what the average criminal in Chicago is doing with their time, but I do know the poverty rate is pretty high, so I would imagine that they're not spending a lot of their time playing violent video games. And as I've already said, I imagine that none of these criminals are following the strict gun control laws that Chicago has. So when you take Chicago into consideration, it makes the insane response to last week's mass shootings even more insane. Because after all, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. Calling for more gun control laws when the ones already on the books in certain cities have no effect is total insanity. And that's why the gun violence in those cities are completely ignored by national news outlets. The next insane thing that President Trump said was that he condemns white supremacy, as if the shooter in El Paso was a white supremacist. He wasn't. He could be better defined as a white nationalist. And yes, there is a difference between the two. A white nationalist simply wants to keep a white nation white. A white supremacist thinks that white people are superior to all other people. I myself am neither a white nationalist nor a white supremacist, so I'm not going to spend any more time on this topic. There's too much insane shit that happened last week that I have to cover. And this next topic is more kind of hypocritical stupidity than insane, and that is a Democratic lawmaker tells Walmart to stop making up stupid shit by targeting video games after mass shootings. Now, this is incredibly hypocritical because Democrats love to make up stupid shit, and it's pretty stupid because if you look into this story, Walmart actually denies reports that it's taking violent video games off the shelves. And before I get into the next story, I have to share and go over this incredibly stupid meme that one of my Facebook friends shared. So here it goes. Romaine lettuce, 13 people hospitalized from E. coli outbreak, 0 deaths reported. Response, pulled from store shelves nationwide, seemingly overnight. And then next to it, firearms, responsible for at least 38,000 deaths in 2016. And then it shows a picture of a rifle. Response, nothing, not a thing, nada, zilch, 0, zip, more die every day. The incredibly stupid thing about this meme is that it shows a rifle, when most firearm deaths are actually from handguns, not rifles. So this meme actually tells me that these people on the left, and actually these people on the right, because the people on the right are no better. They want your guns just as much as the people on the left. Two sides of the same coin. But these people who want to take your guns, they don't want to stop at supposed assault rifles or weapons of war. They want all of your guns. They want all of your firearms. And they're going to lie, cheat, and do whatever they need to do to get your guns. And they have to do this before the national debt gets to the point where it's going to cripple us. So the next video actually shows us how the public is responding to all of this insane rhetoric coming out of the politicians. Now this is a video of people running in Times Square like mad animals after a motorcycle's exhaust supposedly backfired. Now that's not the entire story. If you look into the entire story, after the motorcycle's exhaust supposedly backfired, somebody screamed, "He has a gun." And all these people run like mad animals because they're all as defenseless as mad animals. Because in New York City, it's virtually impossible for anyone who's not in law enforcement to get a gun in order to protect themselves. So they run like mad animals, and they actually ended up injuring some people. Now, while all of this insanity surrounding gun violence was going on, the news managed to slip in a little Russia-linked insanity.
Videos go viral fast. At least 18 million views for this one, showing a white woman calling the police in Brooklyn, claiming a 9-year-old African-American boy groped her.
Sexually assaulted my child.
CCTV footage showed the boy just innocently brushed past the woman, who was dubbed Corner Store Caroline. She later apologized. And more than 16 million views for this video from Texas, showing a woman upset a taco truck was outside her house.
Vámonos. I'll call ICE.
Turns out these videos and dozens of others, all inflaming racial tensions in America, did not go viral by accident. They were pushed and promoted by Russian operatives, according to new research by cyber experts at Clemson University.
Some of these stories would have never gone viral without the influence of Russian disinformation. Their ultimate goal is to divide this country.
The real goal is to get the conflict off Twitter, to get it into the streets.
So they want to get people killed.
They want to get people out in the streets, angry and fighting.
Twitter suspended the accounts flagged by the Clemson researchers. But experts say Russia is stepping up its activities in the run-up to the 2020 elections.
Oh yeah, definitely, guys. It's Russia sowing racial division in this country. It's not the mainstream media and their white supremacy narrative or their white privilege narrative. No, it's none of that. It's not the left or the right. It's the Russians. And I have two perfect articles to follow up that news. This one from the BBC, that was actually at the very top of the BBC.com's homepage, entitled Facing Up to the World's Male Monsters. And as you'll see, it should have been titled Facing Up to the World's White Male Monsters.
You've never experienced oppression in your entire fucking life. Neither have I. You're fucking a white male.
So when you click on the article, you'll see it's actually titled HBO's Secession and Our Reckoning with Male Monsters. And then it has a subcaption that says, As it returns for season 2, The Family Saga is TV's most vital show, and among a wave of art, taking a scathing look at the rich white men who ruled the West, writes Hugh Montgomery.
Their ultimate goal is to divide this country.
The real goal is to get the conflict off Twitter, to get it into the streets.
So they want to get people killed.
They want to get people out in the streets, angry and fighting.
So the BBC admits that television shows and a whole wave of art is attacking rich white men, but the Russians are the ones who are trying to cause racial division in the United States. Yeah, that's fucking insanity right there. I mean, just fucking doublethink madness. And it should actually be noted that all of those viral videos that they were blaming on the Russians actually make white people look bad. So it's crazy. A wave of art making white people look bad, and then viral Russian videos making white people look bad. Yep, total insanity. And it doesn't stop there. Here's an article from The Independent titled, Why Are British Films Not Angrier About the State of the Country? God damn it, British filmmakers, be angry! Be angry! Go to the streets and be angry! And the first paragraph says, Where are all the Brit exit movies? One of the most dispiriting elements about the British film industry currently is its almost complete failure to engage with the complexities and turbulence of contemporary British life. Ken Lock apart, few directors, old or young, are making movies which explore the tensions and injustices in our society or the grotesque comedy of Britain's blundering search for the exit signs from Europe. So when they say where are all the Brit exit movies, they mean where are all the movies criticizing Brit exit. And you know this because they compare Brit exit or they compare Britons wanting to be free of the tyranny of the European Union to a grotesque comedy. The article goes on to say, I haven't seen a great Brit exit film. And by that I'm sure that they mean they haven't seen a Brit exit film that conforms with their perspective of Brit exit. I don't feel the British cinema is engaging with the contemporary in any interesting way at all. Screenwriter and novelist Hanif Kureishi, I'm sure you can guess what his background is. Oh, and then, there we go. We actually can't read anything past that, because it says, subscribe today! And then, it demands that I subscribe to read more. But fortunately, I found this article on another website. So after that, the article goes on to say this. There is one film screening in London this month that does address racism, nationalism, and the tension between classes and generations, which is basically a hypnotic implant or a hypnotic suggestion, suggesting that Brit exit is a racist nationalist movement and that stokes tension between the classes. And that's exactly why the article is saying, why are British films not angrier about the state of the country? So there you have it, another article that is causing more troubles between the races and the classes.
Their ultimate goal is to divide this country.
The real goal is to get the conflict off Twitter, to get it into the streets.
So they want to get people killed.
They want to get people out in the streets, angry and fighting.
So I'm only going to cover one more article, and this article comes to us from Australia. And the article, the news of it comes to us from Australia. The article itself comes from Tech Insider. So the article is titled, DayZ is being banned in Australia over a feature that isn't even in the game yet. Now, the funniest thing about this, it's actually not funny, it's tyranny. It's not even stupidity or hypocrisy. It's insanity, because tyranny is insane. that, people allow such tyranny is what is insane. So the article includes this little snippet. So the Australian Classification Board gave DayZ a RC, refused classification rating, back on June 4th, ruling the title as a game which will depict, express, or otherwise deal with matters of sex, drug misuse or addiction, crime, cruelty, violence, or revolting or abhorrent phenomena in such a way that they offend against the standards of morality, decency, and propriety generally accepted by reasonable adults to the extent that they should not be classified. Yes, they should not be classified. They should be censored. They should be blocked. Because why? Because they offend against the standards of morality that are accepted by reasonable adults. See, I say it's insane the way that Australians let their government treat them. In Australia, they actually don't have free speech. So just let that sink in. I've actually seen videos of people arrested for speaking their mind. Why? Because they don't have free speech. Don't believe me? Go ahead and do a little search on it. And not only do they not have free speech, they also have no right to protect themselves. And here you go, they don't even have a right to decide what they're going to play. The Australian government treats the Australian people like a bunch of babies. Or like a bunch of convicts who don't have any rights. Oh, wait a second. Wasn't Australia started by a bunch of convicts? Oh yeah, that's right, it was. Man, you guys should be ashamed of yourselves. Because the way that you let your government treat you is complete insanity. And the two honorable mentions for this week are India revoking Kashmir special status. And now this is insanity because this is a piece of land that is contested by two nuclear powers. So it should be quite interesting to see where that goes. And the Hong Kong protests are still going on, if not getting worse, to the point where China is sending in their military. Their military is basically on standby. This is a protest that has been going on for a couple of months now, and it's getting very little coverage in the mainstream media. So the insanity is the fact that it's getting such little coverage on the daily news headlines. And that concludes the very first episode of last week's Madness. If there are any stories that I may have forgotten, please share them with me in the comment section below. I'd love to read them.